Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Orange Blade Consultants, your one-stop shopping for all things Bluebeam, from software to solutions and customized training. Before we begin, I'd like to take a second to introduce a new member of Orange Blade Consultants, Jeremy Steinbring, who joins Orange Blade as a manager of client partnerships. Jeremy's really good at understanding the unique challenges that our enterprise customers face, from managing licenses to onboarding new employees and introducing them to the Bluebeam ecosystem, to handling all of your Bluebeam Revu training needs and a whole lot more. So if you have more than 20 or so seats of Bluebeam Revu or Studio Prime, or if you're interested in exploring those technologies, you'll probably run into Jeremy at some point. Now, I'd also like to remind everyone that the Bluebeam Extreme Conference is just around the corner in mid-September, on September 17th to the 19th this year, and it is going to be in Austin, Texas. So, as usual, Orange Blade Consultants will be there in force. And if you've never been, there will be over 1,000 attendees with roundtables and panels and training and networking and, of course, drinking, but very responsible drinking. So come down and say hi to us. We'll be there, or just let us know that you'll be there and we'll come say hi to you. Okay. And finally, if you are a live attendee of this webinar, you'll be seeing a poll, and we would really appreciate it if you could give us a quick response. There are only 3 questions, so it shouldn't be too painful. Okay, let's get started. Now, if you're a longtime user of Bluebeam Revu, you've probably noticed that there were lots of changes made to the 2018 version. And if you're a new user, you might be wondering just how this program is supposed to work in general. Over the course of this webinar, we will be taking a look at the 2018 interface and see how it's all laid out. We'll look at the basic organization of the program and introduce you to how it's all put together. And to do that, I want to introduce an idea or concept to you that I call bar navigation. And this is not necessarily something that Bluebeam, this is not necessarily a term that Bluebeam uses, but it's my term. And I use it to describe the idea of having the layout of the program organized in terms of bars. And by bars, I mean these kind of slivers of features that we can activate that are more or less surrounding the edges of your program window. We'll start with one example here by looking at the menu bars. And this is the most intuitive kind of bar that we have in the program. It is very similar to a menu-driven interface in most other programs that you might use. Your menu bars give you access to features, and they're grouped or organized together based on the menu type itself. So here's one example, the view menu. If we click on the view menu, it gives us access to features related to how we might organize the view of the program. So we'll see here that we have a fit page option or the actual size option. These all relate to magnification of what you're looking at. And these are all features that relate to the view of the program. Now, the document menu relates to features that work on the document or that you have open or selected, or a page as a whole. So that would include features like extract pages, or rotate pages, or overlay pages. Now, the menu organization puts like features together and makes them easier to find. And this was really kind of a problem in older versions of the program because it was not organized in this sort of menu structure. And hopefully going forward, the menu structure will make it easier to find the features we want to look for. Well, now let's take a look at the Tools menu. And these relate to features that add elements to our pages. And that would include stamps or the measurement tools or even hyperlinks. So we're adding them to documents. Now let's take a look at the markup tool, or the markup submenu in particular. The submenu here is organized by kind also. So we have text-related markups, and we have pen-related markups. We have lines, and we have shapes. Now let's take a look at the one element in particular, the cloud tool. And you'll notice that in general, each of these submenu options have three parts to them. We have the center column, which gives us the name of the feature. And we also have, in the left column, we have an icon that represents the feature. So with this cloud icon here, you can see that it more or less represents what a cloud markup would look like. But if you're following along with me, can you find this icon anywhere else in the program window right now? All right, I'll give you a second just to look around and see if you can find it anywhere else in the program window. And time's up. All right, so it's over here. Here we go. So it looks just the same as what we have over here. Now, Bluebeam is signaling us and telling us that there's more than one way to access a feature. So that tells us that we can just as easily, instead of going over here to the markup menu and having to dig through the submenus to find what we're looking for, we can also click on this button right here, and it gives us the same feature. So it tells us that there's more than one way to use to access a feature. But now let's take a look at this column again. Over on the right-hand side of this menu, we see a letter, and that letter represents a keyboard shortcut. So now there's three ways to access a feature. And what the program is kind of hinting at us is that we can work in the way that we want to work. If you're a menu-driven person, if you like using menus, you can choose menus. If you like clicking on toolbar buttons, you can do that. Or if you like using keyboard shortcuts, you can do that as well. Now, the problem with our toolbars over here is that they're not necessarily, the icons that we see on the toolbars don't necessarily immediately tell us what these tools do. They're a little abstract. They look like line art. So how do we distinguish one tool from another? Well, Bluebeam gives us a way to find out what each of these features are by simply taking the mouse pointer and hovering over the tool in question. So if we take the mouse pointer and hover over our cloud over here, it gives us a little caption that tells us what the name of the tool is. And we also have, in parentheses, the keyboard shortcut. So this is a nice, handy little feature to use going forward. Bluebeam gives us a description of many of the items that we have in our program just by hovering over it with the mouse button or with the mouse pointer. Now, speaking of keyboard shortcuts, Bluebeam Revu 2018 has a new feature in it that allows us to access a list of all the keyboard shortcuts. Right up here in the upper left corner under Review, this is a menu. And if we go to the keyboard shortcuts option, we have a dialog box here that gives us a list of all the features in the program that have keyboard shortcuts in them, which is not, not something we haven't seen before. Bluebeam used to provide a PDF that contained all of our keyboard shortcuts. But the difference in 2018 is that these are modifiable. We can assign new keyboard shortcuts to our functions or our tools simply by scrolling through the list and finding the tool that we want to make a change to or apply new keyboard shortcut to. So we'll click on it. And then under here in this text entry field, we can make a new keyboard shortcut or assign one where one doesn't exist. So if for some reason I wanted to make my cloud tool have a shortcut of the letter T, the program will tell me that it's already assigned, and then I can hit the reassign button to apply it to this particular tool. Now, if you're anything like me and you first got into the program and started using and changing all your keyboard shortcuts, it's very easy to get lost and to forget the keyboard shortcuts that you assigned. In that case, you want to make sure that you keep this button in mind. If you click on it, it will restore all your keyboard shortcuts back to their original defaults. Okay, now the next thing I want to look at is at the bottom of the screen. And remember, we're talking about bar navigation. So we've covered the menu bar and we've covered toolbars. And down here at the bottom of the screen, we have something called the navigation bar. The navigation bar is a row of buttons and a text entry field here that gives us the ability to move or navigate through the document. So the page field, I'm opening up a different document here. The page field here gives us the ability to choose a page to navigate to. So if I wanted to go to page 1 or page 2, I'll just click in the middle of the page field, hit number 2 and hit enter. And then it makes me jump to that page. And I'll go back to page 5 by clicking in the middle of the page field and hit the number 5 and hit enter. And not only does it tell me what page I'm on, but it also tells me how many pages there are total in the document. The left and right arrow fields here, or buttons, allow me to go to a previous page or next page. And this button here, this is kind of an interesting button that not a lot of people know about. By clicking on this button, this will take you back to the last thing that you are looking at. So this is very useful if you have hyperlinks in your document and you want to navigate to the last thing you clicked from after you made your hyperlink jump. Just look for the previous view button and it will take you to the last thing that you were looking at. Now, this is not too different from the earlier version, 2017, but I wanted to throw this in there because not a lot of people use the navigation bar. And I just want to point out that it is another bar as part of our bar navigation overview. Now I'm going to move on over here to the panel bar. Now what's the panel bar? The panel bar is a new feature in 2018. And if you're a longtime Bluebeam Revu user, you probably know that there used to be a big orange upside down triangle in the upper left representing a drop-down menu that would allow us to select side panels like our thumbnails or our bookmarks. And so there is no more big orange triangle in the upper left. So the panel drop-down menu has moved. It's moved over here to the window menu. And if we go over here to panels, we can see all of our panels. So if I want to go to the thumbnails, I can just click on thumbnails here, and then it'll open up my thumbnails tab. Now, the thing is, if you go back to the menu and try to click on that again, nothing happens. Once you have it open, selecting the menu doesn't close the panel. Well, now you probably won't use that drop-down menu, first of all, because it's, you have to drill down into it to get the ones that you want. But what you might want to use is the panel bar instead. Now, the panel bar looks like a toolbar, but it isn't. The These buttons over here do not represent features like the cloud tool or the line tool. Clicking on the panel bar button will reveal the panel, but clicking on it again will collapse the panel. Now, how do you know which button you need to click on to collapse the panel? Well, that's this highlighted button right here. So if I want to click on it to collapse it, I'll just click on it again. So it's a toggle switch. It reveals the panel if it's not already open, and then clicking on it again will collapse the panel. Now, the profile that I'm using here has all of my panel bar buttons on the left. So that means that all the panels I click on will open on the left, like this search button right here. Now, if you've used the earlier version of the program, you might be used to having your search panel on the right-hand side. And so you might be wondering why none of the panels open on the right in this, this presentation that I'm giving you. Well, like most everything else in Bluebeam Revu, this is customizable. So in this profile that I'm using, I like to keep things simple and keep all of my panels open on the left. But you may want to have different panels located in different parts of the program. So if you want it to be, if you want to move your search panel, for example, over to the right-hand side, well, what you would need to do is take your mouse pointer and click and drag on the panel button. So I'm going to move my search panel over to the right, and I'm going to click and drag, click to detach it from the left-hand side, and I'm moving my mouse. You can see there's this little circle next to the mouse showing that so that it is showing that it's carrying the search panel tab, and then I'm just going to drop it right here. In a second column, you'll see that the second column appears in this right-hand side. So I'm going to let go right now, and there it is over on the right. So what this is telling you is that we can have a panel that appears on the right, and when if you're looking on the right-hand side, your panel bar will not appear on the same column or bar as your toolbars do, but it'll occupy a separate column unto itself. Now I'm just going to move it back by clicking and dragging it back to its original position right there. Okay, so that's how the panel bar works. And for my money, I think this is actually an improvement on the way that panels used to work in the past. It used to be that you'd have to expand your panels and then select the specific panel from a tab within the panel, or choose it from that orange upside down triangle. Well, this way we can access the panels with one single mouse click right here on the panel bar without having to dig through a menu or an open panel. Okay, now I'm going to talk about my favorite new feature in the program in 2018, and this will wrap up our webinar for today. This is a short webinar, so we're going to talk about the properties bar. Now, the properties bar is a little inconspicuous. It's not something that is really easy to see because, and that's partly by design, because it doesn't take up much space. One of the reasons for the redesign of the program is that when you're working with large-scale documents like this is a 42 by 30 inch construction drawing. When you're working with files like this, it takes up a lot of room, and you want to maximize the real estate on your monitor. So it becomes helpful to have all your features be minimized so it doesn't take up as much space. But one of the problems with using the properties panel in the past, and I'm going to open up the properties panel right now by clicking on this gear wheel over here. This is what the properties panel would typically look like in multiple earlier versions of the program. And this is actually a very useful panel because it allows us to do things like control the properties of certain things like like our markups. So when I select the markup on page, the properties panel appears, allowing me to change its properties. And this is a very useful thing to have, but as you can see, it takes up a whole lot of space over here. So, so instead of using the properties panel that takes up so much space, we can use the properties bar, and that's what we see up here at the very top. So let me start out with another markup, something really simple like the arrow tool. So if I click on the arrow tool and apply an arrow to the page, I can see that when it is selected, my properties bar dynamically changes to give me the most pertinent properties that I can use to change the arrow. So if I want it to be thicker, I can just go up here and make it a little thicker like so. If I want to give it a different color, I can do that as well. So these are all features that I would normally have to modify by going to the properties panel and changing these features over here. But as we can see, by closing down the properties panel, we now have a lot more room. Now, again, the properties panel changes dynamically based on the selection. So right now I have arrow properties selected, but if I choose this cloud that I created earlier, I'll click on it, and now I have cloud properties. If I deselect all of these features by clicking in the background, now I have properties that are related to the page or the document itself. So I can look here in the properties bar, and it tells me that there are 33 pages in this document. Here's the name of the document. If I want to add a blank page after this current page, I can click on this button. And you'll also notice that there's a pull-down menu right here on the far left of the properties bar. And by clicking on it, it shows me what the document's properties are. Now, similarly, if I click on the arrow tool and look at that pull-down menu, you can see that the icon that represents that menu has also changed. And by clicking on it, it allows me to change the properties, the general properties of the markup. So in other words, I can change its subject property instead of having to go to my properties tab and changing the properties from the properties panel. Furthermore, once I change the properties to have it be something that I want to use going forward, so I'll change this to a green arrow, and then I'll go down to the pull-down menu. I can even assign it to a particular layer, or I can change it so that by setting it as the default, then every time I use the arrow tool, it will retain those properties. Or I can even assign it to an existing tool chest or tool set that I've created from before. So these are really quick ways to add tools that you modify on the fly to a tool chest. Now let's take a look at this cloud tool. You can see how distinct it is from the arrow tool. We now have fill options that we can apply. So I can modify the inside of it. I can change its color. I can even change the opacity of this markup so that we can see through the fill, or I can apply a hatch pattern to it. Now, if I choose a different tool, something that has many more properties, and an example of that would be the Cloud tool, or the Cloud Plus tool. So I'm going to choose the Cloud Plus tool right now, apply a cloud, and then position my text. And there I have the Cloud Plus tool. And you can see that the properties bar expands because ordinarily, if we want to modify the properties of a Cloud Plus tool, we go to the Properties panel, and we can see that we can modify the cloud separately from the text or callout portion of the tool. Now let me close down the Properties panel, and you can see that we can do the same thing here. We can modify the cloud separately from the callout. So there's my cloud, and I haven't modified the callout yet. I'm going to now assign a fill color to it separately from the cloud itself. So all of these things we can do from the Properties panel. And again, it just dynamically changes based on the tool that you have selected. So I prefer using this to the Properties panel for most of my property changes. And this is one of the significant new features that are in 2018, applying a Properties bar to the a small sliver of the page, which still leaves us with a lot of room to operate in. I'm going to show you one more thing here. And some of you may not know this particular feature, but I'm going to introduce it to you right now to prove another point about the panel bar. If we open up by going to the window menu, if we go to the Web tab option here, this opens up a website or a web browser within Bluebeam Revu. Now, this is one of those hidden features in the program that not a lot of people know about, but if you open up a web tab, it opens a web browser that just occupies another tab right here on your list of documents that you currently have open. So if I want to go back to my architecture file, I can click on it, but if I want to go to the web tab, I can click on that. Now, since this is a web page, you might be wondering, how do you navigate to a page that you want to go to? And for that, you look up here at the Properties bar, and this is another example of the Properties bar changing dynamically based on what you have selected. So within the context of the Properties, or within the context of the Web tab, we now have an address bar here, and I can choose a website to go to. So the Properties bar is a very rich new feature, and I think it's probably one of the best features that were added to 2018. I do know that the new keyboard shortcuts programmability feature was something that people have been asking for the last 10 years, and it finally got implemented. So some people who've been asking for it every year for the last 10 years may find that to be a much better feature, but for my money, I think the Properties bar is really the best new feature in 2018. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our webinar here today, but there is a lot more to talk about, and we really only hit the tip of the iceberg here in terms of the Revu program itself. So if you're interested in finding out more about our services, you can give us a call here. There's the phone number. Or you can reach out to us using this email if you're interested in training. We are Orange Blade is a platinum level Bluebeam reseller, so we can give you the best volume discounts on Bluebeam software. We also give you web-based or live training. We'll go out to your location and deliver training directly. And we can even consult with you on solutions. So if you've heard of particular workflows that you'd like to implement using Bluebeam technology, we can talk about that as well. So definitely give us a call, send us an email. You can find our website here, orangeblade.com, or you can catch us on social media. Here's our Twitter address, @OrangeBlade, and that's how you find us. So thanks for listening today. This was a short webinar, but I hope you got a lot out of it. All right. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.